We got some big names that went in. Dillon Gabriel from Oklahoma, Cam Ward from Washington State, Will Howard from Kansas State, Riley Leonard from Duke, Daquan Finn, who we just talked about. Let's start with Dillon Gabriel. Max, you've done some reporting on this. Terrific season at OU. Obviously came from Central Florida, and he had a good career there. Did really well with Jeff Lebby for a couple seasons. Oklahoma goes 10-2. What's kind of the motivation that Gabriel's going in the portal, and do we have an idea of where he's going?
Yeah, I think Dillon Gabriel probably is like the epitome of this group of players that we've seen in the last few years that hit the portal, who are veterans, who are multi-year starters, who, I think in talking to our Dane Brugler, our draft expert, I think he probably looks at Dillon Gabriel as a late round pick, possibly an undrafted guy. And that's not a reflection of his production. Obviously, he's been extremely productive in the offenses he's played in. But certainly his size is going to get held against him when it comes to the pro evaluation. And so, Dillon Gabriel's a guy that went through senior day at Oklahoma. I think everybody kind of assumed he was moving on, probably going pro. And I'm not saying Dillon Gabriel doesn't have a pro future. I mean, there's we've got the other leagues out there, right? I mean, I think he's got a chance to keep playing football past college for sure. But nowadays, Sam, it's a pretty good lifestyle for these guys that stay in college. They can go, they can go make $1 million potentially or more by staying in school, by going in the portal and going to a place that really needs a quarterback for 2024. And so I think Dillon Gabriel, I think it's kind of a win-win, to be honest, because I think Oklahoma fans certainly want to see Jackson Arnold and want to see what he can do. And I think if Jackson Arnold's getting 15 bowl practices ahead of the Alamo Bowl there, I think it's probably a really good thing for his development in terms of him winning over this team and beginning his run there as QB1 and his leadership. And I think Dillon Gabriel is going to end up in a really good spot if he doesn't go pro. Now, he can still choose to go pro if he wants to, but there are some of these schools. The thing that has made this quarterback market super interesting, and I'm sure this game of musical chairs is going to happen pretty quickly here, but you've got Oregon, you got Washington, you got USC, you got Miami, and it turns out you got Ohio State now too. With the news on Monday, you got Notre Dame. There are some big time programs that are looking for a guy like Dillon Gabriel because there's some great young talent on their roster. There's some great young talent in the portal, but some of these teams feel like, hey, we're ready to win next year. 12-team playoff. We've got enough guys coming back that we really, really like our chances. So you're not going to go take a Dante Moore or one of these freshmen in the portal that are really intriguing. You want to go take a guy that's a pro. You want to go take a guy that's a veteran who is going to elevate your team. And so I think Dillon Gabriel's in a really good spot here. I think Oregon's one to watch, but certainly there's quite a few teams that I'm sure are calling him. And I think he's going to be, as we saw from his transition to Oklahoma, I think he's going to learn the offense pretty quick and be very productive.
Yeah. And you look at the success that some of these guys had this season. This is a quick way to elevate your team. Like you said, if you feel like you're a quarterback away, Notre Dame with Sam Hartman, Oregon with Bo Nix. Obviously, he's been there a couple of years. Michael Penix at Washington. Obviously, he's been there for a couple of years. But this is a way to really inject some life into your team and really raise the ceiling on your squad. And so when you look at this top tier quarterbacks, we'll break these guys into tiers a little bit. When you look at Gabriel, Cam Ward, Will Howard at Kansas State, Riley Leonard, who are these guys do you think, you could plug in right away and say, hey, you know what? This can turn a team into a contender.
So I think those four guys, Dillon Gabriel, Cameron Ward, Riley Leonard, Will Howard, those guys are, I think they're about to get the bag, Sam.
Matt Rule was talking about that bag. He said nowadays it takes $1 to $2 million to secure these guys, and he's right about that. I've talked to plenty of people around the country about what is the market for these guys, and you hear some crazy stuff. You hear some quarterbacks asking for $1 million or $2 million that I wouldn't pay that money for them, but they're asking for it. They're throwing it out there, and why wouldn't they? Though these are probably viewed. There's always like going to be, different. Every team's got their own board here and their own preference and their own need for what they do scheme wise. But those are the four that I think are really going to be the ones that everyone's fighting over. And we'll see if more enter that change up that dynamic. But I think Cameron Ward. I think he could go pro. I wouldn't put it past him.
but he's got a chance to make a big move here, and I think he is one player that can really boost his draft stock if he goes to the right spot. I think Will Howard is a really intriguing one. I just have talked to a couple coaches who they look at Will Howard and they look at the good tape, like his game against Texas last year, and they say, "I want that guy. That guy can spin it on his best days. He can be a great leader." So I think that one is, I think I know Lincoln Riley got on a private jet and flew out to Manhattan, Kansas to meet with him over the weekend. Lots of other teams wanting to meet with Will Howard, and so he's in a pretty good spot here. And is he like can he be a guy that like wins you a playoff game? I don't know. We're gonna find out because he's gonna go to one of these probably teams that wants to compete for the playoff. But these are the best guys out there, and so that's who they're fighting over. Riley Leonard, I think we all assume is going to go to Notre Dame. I think that was pretty obvious from the day he went in the portal, and I think that's a good pickup for Notre Dame. I think the personal people we talked to, Bruce and I did this breakdown of the quarterback market that you can read on The Athletic right now. Personnel people a little bit more mixed on Riley Leonard than we expected.
Interesting. Yeah, I saw that. That was interesting to hear the contrasting takes on him, especially guys experienced him and had such a good season. And then you mentioned Will Howard. Can he win you a playoff game? Good question. We do know he can win you a conference championship because he
sure
did
do
that.
Yep.
And did 2022, beating an undefeated TCU there, and I thought played terrific. So going to be fascinating to see where he ends up. Let's go to this next tier of guys. You got guys like Kyle McCord at Ohio State. He went in. That was interesting to see. You got Dante Moore at UCLA, Tyler Van Dyke, DJU, Will Rogers. Lots of guys in the second tier. Who in the second tier of guys do you like and stands out that you feel like a lot of these guys are going to get offers? Some of these guys are, you got the freshmen at UCLA and Oregon State. You got some more experienced guys like Grayson McCall has been there forever, and DeQuan Finn. Mm-hmm. Who among these guys are you looking at that are intriguing you the most in this second tier of quarterbacks in the portal so far?
Yeah, you talk to coaches. I've talked to a few during his recruitment and looking at his freshman year. Aiden Childs at Oregon State is one that's going to be really interesting to watch. He is extremely talented. He's a guy that came down to like, he had some big schools on him. I think Oregon, Washington, Kansas State, some of those kind of schools chose Oregon State to back up DJ. And, they liked him so much that they started putting him on every third drive of the game. And he often led touchdowns on those drives. So he got some good reps in his first year for a pretty good Oregon State team. And I think you talked to a bunch of people that have watched him and coached him, and they say this kid's got a chance to be special. So he went in, or he is going in, and I think Michigan State is obviously viewed as the favorite because Jonathan Smith and his staff went there. That would be a huge guy to build around at Michigan State. And an interesting decision, obviously, for Michigan State. They've lost 3 quarterbacks to the portal. They're probably going to take a couple here. You got Aiden Childs, you got Dante Moore, who's a Michigan native and a guy that certainly a former 5-star recruit who could be a really good developmental player for you. I'm really interested to see where those guys go because as you alluded to, Sam, you look at the players this season, from the quarterbacks that came from the portal that have had the most success. They're multi-year starters. They're guys that you've had for a couple of years. Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Dillon Gabriel. These guys that you can get for 2+ years. Joe Burrow. I mean, you go down the list. I think you got a lot better hit rate on those than you do on the 1-year rental. So, interesting to see how those go. What did you think of Kyle McCord going to the portal? Like, just what was your take when you wake up Monday and you see that news?
We've had this conversation before, Max, too. Is I think there is an expectation that when you're a young blue chip quarterback, that when you come in, you're going to shine right off the bat. And McCord obviously had his ups and downs this year, and so I understand. There's a lot of pressure to live up to at Ohio State with the succession of quarterbacks that they've had. And there's a standard there of guys that he has followed. The CJ Stroud, and you see what he's doing at the NFL level right now. But the season he had, Justin Fields, you go back even to even way back to Braxton Miller and JT Barrett and all these guys. I mean, they've had a long line of quarterbacks, and so it'll be interesting to see where he goes and what his market looks like. Certainly still a talent, but you obviously want to see some more consistency out of him. But it's interesting. The other guy in this tier 2 that I'm intrigued by too is Will Rogers, who was at Mississippi State. Ton of production. Obviously, that offense changed. He got banged up. He's got to stay healthy. But I'm interested to see where he goes. And can you plug him in and
he's
right away?
He's kind of, I feel like he's one of the wild cards in this one because I know Chris Hummer from 24/7 has, I think, crystal balled him to Washington, which I think is really curious because and that's kind of the fun thing at this stuff, Sam, is like you're Washington and all these schools, you're like in the middle of a playoff run, but you are making your season defining decision for 2024 this week, in terms of which quarterback you're taking. And Michael Penix and Will Rogers, I think you talk to personnel people, and there's some questions about Will Rogers and how good is his arm talent, playing, from playing in that Leach system, very productive, but can he hit the deep throw the way Penix does is a real question mark there. But you got to pick somebody, right? You can't just sit out here and wait too long and not get anyone. And so I know there are a few teams that look at Will Rogers and feel like he's got the reps and the experience that you plug him into your team, and he has a chance to put up big numbers. And so really curious to see which school he picks, whether it's Washington or Miami or somewhere else. And can he be that guy? I think he had a tough year this year transitioning out of that Leach system. And I think that's such a big piece for any of these guys. Cam Ward too. It's like Dillon Gabriel probably in some ways too. Like, can you go pick the place where you can be, run something pretty similar that you can operate with confidence?
Yeah, no doubt. So let's talk about this next group of guys and quarterbacks, and then we'll move on to some of the non-quarterbacks. But in this next tier, let Tyler Shuck, Texas Tech, Brock Vandegrift, another former blue chip recruit at Georgia, hit the portal. Blake Shapen at Baylor, Jordan McLeod, James Madison, Taylon Green at Boise State. We got the pig farmer Bryson Barnes at Utah. All these guys have hit the portal. Some of these guys, obviously, have been through some things. Shuck has been through some injuries. Shapen, as they had a very, very rough season at Baylor, but you've seen some potential, some flash from him. Vandegrift has kind of had to really sit and wait.
Yep.
Obviously behind Carson Beck, and obviously before that, Stetson Bennett. Barnes had a chance to prove himself this year at Utah. Cam Rising, of course, though, announced he was coming back next year, so I'm sure that plays into it as well. But what are your thoughts on some of these guys in this third tier of quarterbacks, and what kind of a value one or two of these guys could provide at next stop?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's going to be some steals. I mean, from this next group of guys. I think especially if Jordan McLeod is going to Indiana with his coach Curt Cignetti, I think that probably sets him up pretty well to be really productive at the Power 5 level. This is a guy that started his career at USF and then went to Arizona and then went to James Madison and was the player of the year in the Sun Belt this year. And he'll be an interesting one to watch. Like I said, probably Indiana, but I'm sure he's getting some calls. Tyler Shuck is super intriguing to me just because I think on his best days, he's really good. And I think you and I have seen that, Sam. Unfortunately, over the last 3 years, those best days are about 15 games. You know what I mean? He's just had the worst luck in terms of injuries since he got to Texas Tech. Obviously, he was successful in his lone season as the starter at Oregon. This is a guy that backed up Justin Herbert back in the day. So he's been in college a little bit now. But I've talked to some personal people who really like Tyler Shuck, and he's visited UCF, he's visited Louisville. Like, those could be great spots for him if he could just put 12 games together. He could end up being one of the steals of this cycle, I think. And what do you make of Blake Shapen? I think Blake Shapen's going to get some good calls, but do you look at him as one that could be a sleeper in this, or is it just really going to depend on who else goes in and kind of where Blake ends up?
Yeah, no, I think he does. I still like Blake's arm talent. You watch him throw a deep ball, and you when they were in rhythm offensively, he could really operate it at a high level. And they ran a lot of wide zone, they ran a lot of bootleg and play action, and I thought he did that really well. But I always thought, in my opinion, that Blake Shapen suffered a lot from what was around him. I just didn't think they had great talent around him. They did the year that they won the Big 12 title, but then when that roster turned over, he had very few weapons in 2022 around him. Like, the receiver room turned over in a big way, and they didn't really have game breakers on the outside, which made it a little bit harder. And then this year, that offensive line just really was a mess up front. So I know Baylor fans have their opinions of him as well as, he's made his own mistakes and had his own ups and downs as well, and so that's part of it. But I still think there's potential there. He's seen a lot of football. He's been through a lot. I think you get him in the right situation and the right scheme. I think he still can be a really productive player. I think there's still potential for him.